When Tony and Katherine Butterfield put their children to bed on April 18, 2020, little did they know that time would be the last.
This is a case that started with a 911 call that came out to law enforcement in the middle of the night, about 1:15 in the morning.
The couple was startled out of bed when a masked intruder broke into their home.
They were able to, both the forensic evidence that they gathered, the other additional evidence that they gathered, they were able to identify a suspect.
Investigators say the intruder is this man, Albert Johnson, a convicted criminal also known as Psycho Al. Police say at that point, Johnson's motivation was stealing.
What the suspect indicated, that he was feeling financial stress. He went to their house knowing that, thinking that they had money to get money, basically to rob them.
Authorities say Johnson left with $20 and 2 cell phones, but things escalated when he returned.
Once he got to the car, he realized that he had dropped his keys and that he didn't have them. He kicked through the door, and at that point, he didn't have his face mask on.
Detectives say Tony Butterfield recognized Johnson, addressing him by name and asking why. Police say the violent attack happened next.
Tony was defending himself and his family and Katherine, and he had a knife, and there was a struggle. And at that point, he stabbed Mr. Johnson. And Mr. Johnson says in the statement that he gave to the police that it was very painful and he shot him because he got stabbed by him, but he had the weapon.
Officials say Johnson is a convicted felon who was prohibited from possessing a firearm, yet had one that night when he invaded the couple's home.
As he shoots Tony, his wife is also coming to the aid of her husband, and he shoots her because, as he says, she's screaming and she won't shut up.
Shockingly, the children, ages 6, 4, and 6 months, slept through the whole ordeal.
There will never be a substitute for that loss, but they have an incredible family structure and network of loving grandparents and aunts and uncles and so forth who have rallied around the lives of these 3 very young children in this very tragic time.
Johnson is facing charges of aggravated murder and other offenses. His wife, Sina Johnson, is accused of obstructing justice for allegedly lying to police about seeing her husband on the day of the crime.
Incredibly tragic. You think about those 3 children. You know, they're sleeping, mom and dad put them to bed, and they wake up and their lives are changed forever. But as we heard, they do have a strong family that's going to help support those children. Let's bring in John Franke. He's an anchor reporter for one of our affiliates, KSTU, out in Salt Lake City, who does such a great job out there in covering crime and justice, and John leading it all. John, let me ask you this. His wife, Psycho Al's wife, she now apparently has struck a deal where she's going to testify against her husband, the career criminal?
Yeah, so her name is Sina Johnson. She actually spent 3 months in jail after this all happened. She was arrested for potentially obstruction of justice. She struck a deal to get that pleaded down. And part of that agreement was that she would testify against her husband should his case go to trial. Again, she spent 3 months behind bars. She's accused of getting rid of his bloody clothes that he brought home after this attack in West Jordan.
So this is where, from my perspective, it gets interesting. Now, you've got the wife testifying against the husband, right? And this still is a potential death penalty case. I mean, she could be testifying against her husband, helping to send him potentially to death row. But I want the inside view from you, John. I know you're out there on the ground covering this. We don't get a lot of death penalty cases out of Utah, do we?
We don't. Currently, there's only 7 inmates on death row in the state of Utah right now. And to find a conviction of somebody who was convicted to death, you have to go mostly back to the 1990s. There was one in 2015, but even that case dates back a few decades. The person in that case confessed to a murder back in the 80s. And then back in 2010, the Supreme Court of Utah sent that to a trial. And in that trial, that defendant was also convicted and sentenced to death. So right now, 7 death penalty cases, or death penalty inmates right now, but most of those cases dating back to the 1990s. So Utah, a very conservative state, but also a very religious state as well. And so there's that seesaw there of conservatism versus the religious beliefs. And is it okay for people to put their neighbors to death?
Any indication which way the prosecutors are going to go here, whether or not they will ultimately seek the death penalty here, or they haven't said yet?
You know, they haven't said yet. I can't imagine they would. We've seen some pretty egregious cases here in Utah over the past 2 years. I think back to last May, where a man was actually confessed to murdering his 5-year-old niece. He made a deal in that case with police. He let them know where the body was, and in exchange, they did not pursue the death penalty in that case. And that's one of the most egregious cases we've had here in the state. And there was a lot of anger from the public when that happened, because people felt he should have been prosecuted and face the death penalty. But even in a case like that, the defendant did not face the death penalty, instead got life in prison. I would imagine here in Salt Lake County, where this took place, that would be the case yet again.
Those 3 children now lost their parents, Tony and Katherine, but I've seen some clips from vigils and other places. It seems like an amazing community and an amazing family that's really going to help take care of those 3 kids.
Yeah, this was a very young family, a beautiful family. The parents of barely 30 years old. And as you mentioned in that previous story, the kids from age 4 to 6 months. So a very young family. They had their own landscaping business, as you mentioned. And they lived in West Jordan. That's about a 20-minute drive due south here of Salt Lake City, a suburban community, very tight-knit. Many people that live in that neighborhood attend the same church. So after this happened, there were several candlelight vigils. People tied ribbons around trees in that neighborhood. There were a lot of tears shed as well, because living in Utah, it's a pretty safe state, and a crime like this just doesn't happen here. And when it did, it pretty much shocked really the entire community.
John Franke from KSTU, are a strong affiliate out in Salt Lake City. Appreciate you coming on tonight, and I do understand that today's actually your day off, so we doubly appreciate you coming on and helping us out, figure out what's going on with this important case. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, as you know, on the docket, we're continuing to track this case. Let's take a look at what's happening. There was supposed to be a hearing today in the case, but it was canceled, and no trial date has been scheduled yet. But as you know, we will continue to track this one for you. And if there are any developments, we'll let you know and see if, in fact, prosecutors go for the death penalty in this one.